Next presentation by Dr. Sarat Chandra will be endoscopic transseptal approach to pituitary tumors, development of a new retractor system.
So thank you very much, chairpersons. I could actually grasp the meaning behind Professor Ashikar's presentation, especially with relationships to the nasal complications. And as I was coming up, I just requested him if he could sit through my presentation also. So here I am going to describe the genesis, the genesis of development of a new retractor, which could make the surgery more efficacious, more easier, and perhaps save us a lot of endoscopic equipment which comes with it. And we know that endoscopy now has become the bread and butter for almost all the pituitaries as well as the cranials. And definitely, what is more worrying is that while everybody uses an endoscope, flaps I agree with, but at the same time we have to understand that we are doing a lot of damage, especially for the mucosa when we are overusing endoscope, especially for very standard and routine pathologies like pituitaries and some cranials. I will skip the contraindications because I don't think this is the scope of the talk. But I would like to show you a host of, so when a young surgeon starts doing endoscopy, he says, okay, I'll start endoscopy, goes maybe for a 15-day fellowship, and then you have this dealer coming in and says, sir, you should take a 32-point endoscope system or a 64-point, best is 108 point, you take all that for next 25 years. You're all settled. But the question is, are they all required or are they just industry driven? Now, we have to understand that pituitary tumors form 80% of or even more in a smaller centers of endoscopic and nasal surgical procedures. And perhaps, this is also to the fact that almost all pituitaries are done by a binostril technique. So you are excising the posterior part of the mucosa, you are excising the posterior part of the septum, you are going through the pristine part of mucosa in order to access something which our ancestors or predecessors were accessing very nicely through a transseptal and an extramucosal approach. Dr. Ashikar has clearly shown that whenever we do a monostril, the nasal quality of life is much better than when we do a bimanual approach. Now, in endoscopic, we know we have to create spaces and we have to destroy this pristine surfaces, which is completely physiological. So, is it justified? And the final common pathway is absolutely the keel of water and the sphenoid sinus. This is where we have to be. Whether you go through endoscope, whether you use virtual reality system or use a 3D microscope, this is where you have to reach. And now this, I will show you a video of a patient who underwent a simple endoscopic pituitary surgery by manual approach elsewhere, somewhere else. And he came with a recurrence. And when I put my endoscope, I was horrified to see that his whole nasal cavity was converted into just one single cavity. So you can understand what is the amount of problem these patients would be having. Now there is something which we are neglecting, which I think Dr. Ashikar has been practicing since a long time. Our predecessors again very intelligently thought of this extramucosal space, which is a transseptal approach. Only thing is their retractors were very bulky, they were very, very big. And when we came into the era of endoscopic system, strangely this has been forgotten. So we said we want to teamwork, we want to bring ENT surgeons. Nothing wrong about it. But thing is, for things which could be done in a more simpler, efficacious route, why are we trying to do in a more complex way? So I thought, can we re-explore back this transseptal approach? So I started initially, I wanted to do something different. So I tagged the endoscope to a robotic system, and this is how it looks. And I did some 20-30 cases, but I'll have to tell you it was more good for presentation. But ultimately, I found out that the robotic system is too bulky, it's too expensive, sometimes it freezes, it doesn't give you so much of motion, and it's like a stable holder which is not required for any kind of endoscopic system. So then, I came across this idea that can we use a customized MRI film, just cut it, and dissect the submucosal space and just push it inside. And this, I thought about it almost a couple of years ago. So almost for 20-30 cases, I used to take the simple MRI film, measure the size of the nasal cavity, mark it and then fold it into just a V-shaped retractor, and then create the submucosal space, dissect it right up to the keel of the vomer, fracture the keel of the vomer with a periosteal elevator, and then push in this retractor. And it worked very well. I was very happy because the visualization improved greatly. You had a V shape with a 12 o'clock position where you could slide the endoscope up and down very easily. The job of the assistant became very easy. But the problem was it was too thin and collapsible. It does not fracture the septum at the keel, so we have to fracture it manually, and sometimes that can cause a lot of cosmetic problems. And after some time, because of the constant use, it kind of collapses, doesn't fit the issues of tears and mucosa. So if the person doesn't have good amount of experience, he can go and damage the mucosa. And then I sat with my research associates, and we have this system on the computer where we can design ideas, which is part of the Center for Excellence for Epilepsy. And then I asked him whether we can devise something which can lock here and form a triangular plate, so that we'll now have a good space where we can introduce the retractor. But you see what happens, nowadays we have these computerized systems where we can completely validate an idea, and we found that when we are about to close it, there is no way we can prevent the hinge from hitting one of the sides, so it doesn't close completely. Then I thought maybe we can design something like this, which is attached to this plastic film. But the problem is, how do we keep it closed? Because the whole idea is it should be closed, go right up to the keel of the vomer and open up and get deployed over there, which is not possible. And then I came across this idea where we have this tunnel here which is made with overlapping plates on either side, and there is a rod which goes through it. So when we open it, it kind of opens up because of the shear strength of the alloy. But the problem is, again, you create holes at the bottom which occupy space. Over here we are talking about every millimeter of the space. And then finally we came across this idea. So over here we have a system which is made with alloy, coated with the Teflon, and you have this ring which has a wire, and this portion is not attached, and when you pull it, the whole thing kind of opens up by its sheer tensile strength. And so when you pull it, the whole thing opens up, and this is what I wanted. So the upper portion can be bent over the surface of the nose so that we can create this kind of space over here. And I got it patented, and then I thought what I would call it. Then I thought the best thing is to call it as a EASYTRAC-P. So P stands for pituitary. It's dynamic, flexible. It minimizes the use of standard endoscope. Believe me, the only endoscope instrument I use is now the endoscope itself. You can put in your suction, you can put in your regular bipolar, everything else. So this is a short video to show how the EASYTRAC functions. So I initially give a cutaneous buccal junction incision. Now do a mucosal dissection. Now this is done initially under microscope, under endoscope. Now I take the dissector, it's a number 2 pen fill, nothing fancy. Take the number 2 pen fill dissector right up to the keel of the vomer, and no need to fracture it, just ensure that you get down to the level of keel of vomer and create a nice submucosal space all around. And then insert the EASYTRAC system, and then pull out the wire which deploys it by itself, and then open the outer part. And now the only instrument you have to introduce is the suction. So as you keep on introducing the suction, the blades will open further and further because it already has that spring-like action, and it starts reflecting the mucosa by itself from the base. So you can see how nicely it fractured the septum right at the base. It's a very cosmetically very elegant solution, and you can use only suction and then take an endoscope as the space increases. Now you're right at the keel of the vomer, so it's very beautifully exposed. You go on retracting the mucosa on both the sides, both anteriorly as well as posteriorly. Again, use a number 2 pen fill. No other endoscopic instruments are required. This is just a standalone system. Again, use a suction to completely expose the sphenoid ostium on both the sides. This is just like the regular microscopic transnasal approach, but with an excellent visualization using an endoscope. And the endoscope rests at the 12 o'clock position on the V. So all that the assistant has to do is he has to move the endoscope in and out. And now you can advance the retractor. Now this is a dynamic retractor, so it allows you to push it to one side, so you're able to visualize the corners. So you can use suction and visualize the corners very nicely. So now take a down cut, come down on both the sides, and then remove the entire keel of the wormer. Comes out, now expose the sella. So I just want to show you how easy it is. So again, I'm using a monopolar, the regular monopolar, to denude the mucosa. Then again, use the upcut. We bring down the flap, bony flap down like this. So we can replace the flap again. Then the regular dural opening, tumor decompression. So you can see how we can go around the corners. You can advance it inside. It's unlike the hardy speculum. This will not fracture the sphenoid sinus. So no danger of any optic nerve injury. So it becomes a very regular, and it's all urinostril. And then finally I will come to the end when I just replace back the keel of the wormer. And you can put some fat, you can deploy some glue inside the submucosal tunnel, which itself will create a watertight space because you're not gone inside the nasal cavity, and that itself may prevent any kind of CSF leak. So bring it out, and once we do that, we just take a needle holder and a suture and just put a stitch there. That's it. There is no need for any kind of tampons to be put inside. And you can push the septum from the opposite side so that the septum comes right into the center. And you can see when I take the endoscope, the mucosa is pristine. We have not touched any mucosa either on this side or on the opposite side. That's on the opposite side, and you can see you can remove the mucosa completely. So this is the first prototype which is out. So the commercial version should be out. It's been done through AIIMS. I don't actually have any control of the price, but definitely we are trying to keep it as easily affordable as possible. And this is how the working looks. So you can see that all that this assistant has to do is to pull out the endoscope and keep it inside. And I'm using all regular instruments, like the usual bipolar. I use the usual bipolar. And you can go up to 4 instruments through a nose because there is a huge amount of space which is created. Few examples, we have used with this patient who was 7 feet 6 inches tall. We made a special retractor for him, that's a pre-op and post-op. A few examples, pre and post-op, that's a pre and post-op. Now I had some complications, not with this retractor, it can happen to anybody, it's a giant tumor with an infarct. That's a cranial where I had to stage it to remove it completely again using the EASYTRAC system, some examples of giant tumors. So till now, with my experience of 1,000 plus pituitaries over the past 20 years, I've done over 172 endoscopic. I switched over completely to transseptal, and now I've started using the EASYTRAC system in 30 patients. And what I would say is, it's not a question of whether I can remove it completely or not, it's more effective or not, but definitely it creates a much more minimally invasive optimal route so that you can get there very easily, effectively. It just takes a couple of minutes to get. Few of my complications, the pseudoaneurysm, that was actually for, so we did a coiling, that was IC injury, it could be very well managed and packed, and later on we did a coiling. So pseudoaneurysms have, so advantages, extra transseptal approach is, it's absolutely mentioned, it preserves the mucosa, that is, you can always convert to microscopy if you are not so comfortable. Now why not a speculum? You can just say you can push in a speculum and use a speculum. Now speculum occupies 8 millimeters of space compared to 0.3 to 0.4 millimeter thickness of the EASYTRAC system. This is completely flexible compared to the rigidness of the speculum. So you can easily go to the corners, you can go into the cavernous sinus. The damage to the surrounding tissues is minimal. In a speculum, you really do a lot of damage to the turbinates. In this, it's minimal. You just need to retract as much as you want to do. So summarizing, EASYTRAC is flexible, expandable, lots of space, uninostril. Mucosa continues to remain pristine, dynamic, you can look around the corners. Spacious, only the endoscope and only endoscope instrument which is required is endoscope. Truly minimally invasive because it preserves the integrity of all the nasal structures. It's easy, effective, elegant, and may also be used for transnasal approach for people who are die-hard fans of, I will not use transeptal, put it in the nasal cavity, deploy it, it's going to lateralize the middle turbinate and you have a fantastic space. So I don't know how many of you read this book. I was talking to Dr. Muthukumar whether he can write a review. It's a beautiful book. It's about 4 mice, out of which they run out of cheese and 2 mice move away. The third mice says that I want to remain, and then it decides to also move away, but the 4th mice does not move. He says, the cheese has run out, I will get fresh cheese. So idea is you need to adapt to change quickly. The quicker you let go of the old cheese, the sooner you can enjoy the new cheese. And the other thing, always remember, before you go to something new, always think that what would you do if you are not afraid. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sarat. That was a very innovative approach. And I just have one question. Does this alloy, does it have some sort of a memory?
Yes, it has a memory which can be tailored. So we are still in the process of custom. It is a memory which can be tailored. They are all 3D printed. So when we produce this alloy, we can create the amount of memory we want on the computer. So I am still in the process of trying to find out which is the optimum memory for the alloy. Because what I want is, moment I introduce this inside, I want that when it expands, it should just fracture the septum at the base and from the keel of the vomer so that we have an exposure. I don't want it to expand so much that it damages the surrounding tissue. At the same time, it would shear off the mucosa. So that's the advantage. So if sometimes I feel that the memory is too much, we can actually reduce it. You reduce the memory on the computer.
Listening to the first 2 lectures, somehow I get the impression we are moving away again back from the binostril approach to uninostril. Am I right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. At least for most of the routine stuff. I'm not saying about the extended skull-base approaches. But most of the routine stuff, which is pituitaries, I think in 80-90% of the cases, we do need to look into what is a significant amount of morbidity.
The resistance would be low. Interesting presentation. I'm sure there are few.
Dr. Rajshekar, you want to say something, sir? This is actually a modification of your approach.
So, quick question. So, what do you do when you need to have a nasocircle flap for the same?
It's very easy. It's very easy. You just pull out the retractor. Half of your nasoseptal flap is done. Cut at the base, cut at the bottom. You have a wonderful nasoseptal flap. It's so easy. It's easier than actually trying to do the traditional nasoseptal flap.
Sarat, very nice innovation. Like you said, I think the key is the amount of memory that is there for it to open up. And the only thing that I can foresee if you want to run into trouble is that you cannot predict that for an individual patient because the tissue is different in different patients. In some patients the septum is mostly bone. Although it's supposed to be some cartilage and some bone, it's tougher. We know it when we go in there. For an acromegalic, of course, going to be completely different. But even for a routine, there is a wide variation in the tensile strength or whatever of the septum. But I think there is it's a nice innovation and there is a place for this. I would love to try it.
Thank you, sir. I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I of course use a TN speculum, like I pointed out, which has got very tapered blades. So they are different from the hardy speculum. So they do not compress the middle turbinates or any of the turbinates for that matter. And the other thing that happens with the hardy speculum is that you block off the nasolacrimal duct.
Absolutely.
And that's why you end up with a lot of patients tearing and having puffiness of their eyes in the post-operative period. If you remember earlier days when we used to do the hardies and really push, that used to be the other morbidity. So great work.
Thanks, sir.
I hope to receive some specific.
I'll send you I'll send you the prototypes. Professor Goel, sir, you want to say something?
One thing I can tell you is, I clearly didn't understand the whole concept. But the very fact that you have been able to patent it and you have been able to commercialize it, and the very fact that you have been able to successfully use it in 30 cases, I'm sure it has merit. The only thing is, I don't do the endoscope, so I don't know exactly the value of your, this innovation. But innovation is an innovation, whether it is small or big, and it has to be complimented and credited, and I'll give you full credit. And I hope this becomes, like hardy speculum, it becomes more popular and more famous, you also become as famous as Hardy.
Thank you for your kind words. Thank you very much.
Now the next talk is by Professor Rajesh Chandra from PGIMER